Hello everyone and welcome once again to Flow Mountain Bike. Today we are in Sydney at Centennial Park for the Advanced Traders Australia Dealer Show, and we're going to be taking a look at some of the new bikes from the 2019 range from Norco and Merida. So let's start with this one right here, the Norco Range C2. Now the big news for the Range series and also for the Optic and Norco Sight series as well is that they all get a 10mm longer travel fork, and that means that on a bike like this, which comes in a 275 and 290 version, you're now going to be looking at a 160mm up back and then a whopping 180mm up front in the 275 version of this bike. In the 290 that gets bumped down a little bit, you're still looking at 150mm rear with a huge 170mm fork up front. Now Norco have always prided their bikes on being incredible descending machines, and that's something that we can attest to. We've tested a lot of these bikes over the years and they always handle so well when you point them downhill. This brand has always been about that downhill capabilities rather than uphill efficiencies, and they've really hammered that point home for 2019 by going to a longer travel fork across the entire range, and they've also upsized the tyres as well. So you're going to be finding beefier, wider tyres in the Optic, Sight and Range series throughout the entire Norco 2019 lineup. Coming in at $5,999, the Norco Range C2 is our pick of the bunch when it comes to the Range series, partly because we just love the way that it looks. Last year this bike was pretty bland looking in our opinion, and this year this gorgeous glossy red really pops. And if you're going to have an expensive fast bike, it might as well look expensive and fast, and we think that really comes through with this stunning paint job. It's a great colour. It's equipped with a Fox Performance suspension package, front and rear, a 36 and a DPX2 shock, and you've also got great Maxxis tyres, E13 wheels, and a full complement of SRAM throughout, including the Code brakes and a GX Eagle drivetrain. A really dialed package. Sure, it ain't that cheap at almost $6 grand, but God, it looks good, and you can bet your bottom dollar it's going to go downhill like an absolute bastard. Throughout most of the Norco dual suspension range, you have the option in wheel sizes as well as frame materials, carbon or alloy. Are you going to be better off going for the higher spec alloy frame, or are you better off to take a hit on the components in order to get a carbon frame? When it comes to the Norco Sight series, if we had the choice between going for the A1, this particular bike, which comes in at $4,999, or the C3, which is the entry-level carbon bike, coming in at $5,199, we'd save the $200 and go for this one. We think it is a really dialed package. Again, there has been a travel increase on this bike versus the 2018 version. On the 275 bike now, you have a 160mm travel fork with 140mm out back. On the 290, that drops down to 150mm up front and 130 out back. Now this bike is dialed. You have a RockShox Pike RC up front, a Fox DPX2 in the Performance series out back handling the suspension duties. So really reliable stuff. The drivetrain is SRAM GX Eagle, and the brakes are Guide R's, which are really consistent and solid brakes. Maxxis rubber, WTV wheels. You're hard pressed to find a bike that is going to give you fewer dramas on the trail than this. A high performance alloy bike at under $5,000. Okay, the downhill market isn't quite what it used to be. The rise of enduro and far more capable trail bikes have meant that this style of bike, a full-on downhill beast, is not something that you see so often anymore, but it is the Formula One of our sport, and Norco have gone right to the top with the new Aurum HSP. This bike has been seen on the World Cup circuit under Sam Blenkinsop for a couple of seasons now, and it's now available to the general public. HSP, it stands for High Single Pivot, and that means you're going to have a very rearward axle path. That rear wheel is going to get out of the way of bumps and allow you to maintain incredible momentum. Now, ordinarily with a high single pivot design, you're going to get awful pedaling characteristics through incredible amounts of pedal feedback. But thanks to the introduction of an idler pulley system like this, you can effectively neutralize how much pedal feedback you're going to get, even as that rear wheel is walloping over the biggest bumps. So pretty smart. We think it's incredible how fast 29er downhill bikes have started to look normal, and this bike is rolling on the big wheels as well. Maybe it's simply that downhill bikes have had to drop in price in order to compete with the enduro market, but this thing is absolutely stacked for $6,199, especially when you're considering it's got a full carbon frame. So if you are one of the people who are still racing downhill, and God knows there are less of you than there used to be, give this bike a look. gravel bikes. Now this segment is growing like crazy. Last year Norco just couldn't get their hands on enough of these Search XR carbons, and we can see why. They're a really sleek looking bike whilst also being seriously capable as a multi-day gravel monster machine. They have all of the mounts that you could ever need to bolt on. Fenders, racks, bottles galore, and hit the trails for a couple of days of exploring those back roads. We think this bike in particular is gorgeous for this year. $3,499 is the price tag. It comes with a SRAM Apex 1x group set and everything that you need to get into it for what is, we think, a really reasonable price. Now there are two other versions of the Search XR Carbon available. For $4,499 you get one equipped with a Shimano Ultegra 2x drivetrain using the new Ultegra RX clutch rear derailleur. And for $5,499 you can get the top of the range Search XR Carbon, which comes with a SRAM Force group set, a dropper post and 27.5-inch wheels with big fat rubber. Yeah, this one is a real winner in our minds. Okay, let's take a look at the 2019 Merida range. Now the really big story for this model year is the complete revitalisation of the 120 platform. 120 mils front and rear in 275 and 29er wheel options, though advanced traders are going to be bringing in far more of 29ers than the 275s, reserving the smaller wheels only for small and medium sized frames, which we think is a wise choice because 120 mil travel 29er is pretty much the ideal trail bike for most situations that you're going to encounter on Australian trails. The 120 now shares the same float link suspension design as found on the 140 and 160 series, and that is such a good thing. So great to see that now carrying across to this shorter travel platform as well. The geometry has been completely revised too. It is a much slacker, longer bike than it ever was in the past. The head angle has been kicked back by a full 2 degrees and the reach lengthened significantly, as well as the chainstays shortened. So all in all, a much more aggressive handling bike than the 120 was in its previous guise. Merida bikes have always been great value for money, and this year is no different. Now this is the top of the line alloy framed version of the 120, the 120 800, and it comes with a RockShox Revelation, a deluxe rear shock and a GX Eagle drivetrain at $3,699. So you can't really ask much more than that. Now there is also going to be a carbon version of this bike coming to Australia just at a later point in the season, the 120 8000. We're going to be getting that bike on test as well, so keep your eyes peeled for that one soon. Now we can't talk about Merida bikes without mentioning how awesome their e-bike range is. They are absolutely kicking some butt here in Australia. This one here is the top of the line E160 9000E. There aren't a huge number of changes for 2019 other than this really sleek black and gold paint job. The fork is now an e-bike optimized fork, which means it's a little bit stiffer and stronger than a conventional Fox 36. And the cables for the Di2 shifting and mode shifter now run internally through the handlebar too, just to neaten things up a little bit. We can't tell you the exact figures, but the sales of these bikes have been ridiculous, and the growth year on year truly staggering. We are talking 12-fold growth here in Australia over the course of a 2-year period, which is unbelievable.